Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Swisspreneur Briefing. It's a live stream slash podcast that we're going to record today. And it's sort of a new format that we want to try out today with two amazing guests that I will introduce in a second, where we want to talk about the news, the funding rounds, the exits, and whatever is moving and shaking up the Swiss startup ecosystem. And we want to dive a bit deeper into the headlines so we can give Swiss-based founders a summary of what's happening so they don't need to read the news and can actually continue building amazing companies and discuss what these news and developments actually mean for the ecosystems and for everyone here as founders. It's my pleasure to welcome our resident guests here today. Sophie, you are the founder and managing partner at Vitamin C, an early stage venture fund investing in climate mitigation and human adaptation. Thank you so much for being here and for spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me.
And Laurent, you are a well-known face in the Swisspreneur ecosystem. You're the co-founder and co-CEO of Holy Code, where you and your team actually build AI and tech solutions for startups and SMEs. Thank you for being here again.
Love it, like always.
It's a pleasure. And also a quick shout out to our sponsor. We are actually collaborating with the Swiss Startup Days, the leading Swiss Deep Tech Catalyst event taking place in Bern on May 21st. We have been there every year. We'll also be there this year. And if you want to check out the program or get your ticket, which are all out now, check out their website at startupdays.ch. And for everyone tuning in, if you have comments, questions for the group here, post them in the comments on the social channel that you're joining us from so we can actually directly address them in the live session. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Sophie, the first question is for you. Before we get into the specific deals and the developments, just a bit of a reassessment at the beginning of the year. How does the Swiss startup ecosystem feel to you right now? Do you feel calmer, more cautious, more quietly optimistic? What's your feeling about the ecosystem right now?
I think it's all of these. On one hand, super optimistic because we see a lot of talent, specifically in robotics, AI, whatever our universities are producing is really world class and also recognized here in the Bay Area. Finally, I hear more and more other VCs, US VCs talking, oh, Zurich, oh, ETH, oh yeah, lots of cool robotics, oh yeah, drones, AI. So and that's new, right? That hasn't been the case just a few years ago. So I think in that sense, in terms of talent and potential, we're on everyone's radar. That's the great news. I think the bad news is we just haven't shown yet that we can really truly scale this. And I think there's a few examples of scale-ups, which are great, but by far not enough. And by far not at the scale of what a Silicon Valley VC is looking for, right? Right now, they're talking about trying to find not just unicorns anymore. Now they want to find $1 trillion companies, right? That's the kind of scale they're thinking of. And in Switzerland, let's be honest, a $200 million exit, $300 million exit is still something fantastic and celebrated, which, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, but it's just not the scale that that we could imagine potentially and that most people here are thinking about. And I think that is something that we need to change. And also, I believe we're on the right track, but also realizing it's taking longer than we would like. There was a group actually just before the Christmas holiday came to the Bay Area with Martina Hirayami. She is the Swiss State Secretary for Education and Research, InnoSwiss. All the universities came, and they really came on a small research trip, to say, to talk to US VCs and other countries about what they did correctly to really not just create an innovation ecosystem, but also turn this into a scale-up ecosystem. So it gave me the sign that it's also on the political radar now that things need to happen, which is good news, I think. Hopefully fast enough.
Agree. Yeah, for sure. And it's great to hear that the Swiss tech and the Swiss universities and the whole ecosystem basically is more and more on the map in the US. That's a really, really good development. Still a lot of homework to do, but great to hear about the first-hand experience that you just shared. Laurent, if we start the year with you, based on the few weeks that we have so far in January, what feels genuinely different already this year, 2026, and what is sort of clearly hasn't really changed at all?
Well, hasn't changed is everyone's talking about AI, everyone's talking about drones and robotics. So this is still all the same. I mean, for good reason after all, but that's just the talk of the town. What has changed? Well, not specifically, I would not say now specifically in January, but if I think back January last year, we didn't really have stuff like Lovable and Base 44 on the map yet. That was just popping up. So obviously I'm a bit one-sided here because I'm looking at software development, but there's a lot that has happened in software development in the last 12 months with AI, the capabilities of tools like Base 44, Lovable, these sort of things, they are drastically changing the landscape of software development. So I think that's actually the area that I think we've seen by far the most progress in the last 12 months, and a lot more to come. Also, when you look at the valuations of those companies and how fast it goes, that's just absolutely, I was going to say a word I'm not supposed to on live stream, but absolutely crazy. So yeah, there's lots to come. And to add on to what Sophie said before, I think Switzerland or Europe in general, we're doing a much better job now at thinking bigger, but the scale at which you now need to think bigger has improved so drastically over the last 2-3 years. So Sophie said, like they're talking about $1 trillion companies now. We need to even buckle up and get more aggressive around that now, right? So I think there's more of we can get to $1 billion valuation sort of mentality around in Europe now. But yeah, now you need to be $1 trillion. So good luck. Keep pushing.
Yeah. And we should have our own lovables, right? We're also not there yet. Let's be honest, right? So
yeah, that's a good question. Why is Sweden, for example, as a country, able to produce quite a few of those amazing scale-ups and also IPOs such as Spotify back then? What is Sweden that is a similar size of market doing differently to us? I don't know in details. Probably Sophie and Sylvan, you know more about that than me. But I think that's always a good thing to look at because Sweden is doing an amazing job on this. And I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn.
There's actually one thing next week on Thursday. There's an event happening by SIX and Swisscom Ventures. I'll be moderating it. It's on Thursday evening, where we exactly talk about the IPO market. So in doing the prep work for that event, I learned that in Sweden, it's very normal that you have access to like local capital that invests in those IPOs. So they do a pretty good job in helping small caps going public, and small caps in that sense are growth companies that basically want to go public, and they help them to really access that liquidity. And I think that plus the global role models coming out of Sweden help a lot to build that ecosystem, to build bigger companies and have access to the funds that you need in order to do so. So without wanting to go too deep into that topic, but I think that's one of the key aspects that we currently still lack in Switzerland. The capital is here, but it's not available. While in the US, you have the biggest and most liquid capital markets in the world. So there it's like a no-brainer why you should actually go to $1 trillion IPO, maybe SpaceX or whoever, we'll see. So it's just a different ball game. And I think the liquidity markets are a very key part of that.
And I actually did also in advance of that visit, that delegation came a look into other European countries and even in the US. And some of these countries have started in the 50s and 60s already building government subsidies or support system to bring more money into venture capital. So that's also something we haven't really done in Switzerland. Sweden has done that, right? They are a big LP. The government is a big LP in venture funds, right? For example, and that helps to also mobilize more private capital. And I think that's one of the problems. The entire capital stack is missing from the early stage venture to the growth to then funding the pre-IPO companies, right? That's exactly what you're saying. And I think there we need to catch up because the money is there, right? It's just not going into the right pockets. Yeah,
exactly. And this is actually a perfect start because liquidity without IPOs is the first topic I wanted to address with you guys. And IPOs still remain very rare in Switzerland for partially the reasons we just outlined, but liquidity is still happening. I think about the next thing, private equity exit for, I think, 3 billion to Vista Equity Partners just towards the end of last year. But also this week, I think, or last week, Threema actually announced another transfer of ownership to another private equity. So that was, of course, a bit more quietly without a lot of hype, but there seems to be liquidity entering the Swiss market or the Swiss startups. And I wonder, from your perspective, Laurent, what do you see in the Swiss ecosystem? Should the founders in Switzerland now treat the private equity investment sort of as the realistic liquidity path, or should we actually aim for higher aspirations and actually want to go for that IPO in the long run?
It's very difficult to say because it depends on each founder's characteristics and what they're after, right? And I mean, if we want to become a force in the world in terms of startups, we need to go for IPOs. We need to find a way to have more capital available, and we need to push for that. I think the companies that will keep doing that are the ones that are growing extremely fast, revenue-wise or user-wise. The ones that have amazing technology that it's very clear that it can be, if it is applied well, can be changing the course of the world, so to speak. Those are the ones that I think they will always try to go after the IPOs, or should try to go after it, because they are set up for that. The companies that are probably not as much in that bracket as everything else, right? Slower growth, maybe more profitable, good technology, but easy to copy, these sort of things. I think a lot of those cases will not make it down that road. And that's also why private equity still plays a very vital role in Switzerland. I mean, when I look around and look at the founders that I know that were successful, most of them either sold to a strategic buyer or to a private equity company. There's super few that actually got to the IPO or the huge exit in the States or something similar. And I think it's usually companies that have a relatively clear path to profitability. That's what private equity is looking for, right? So either you are profitable or it's a very clear path to profitability, and there's some defendability in your stack, or you're a very nice add-on to a platform play that they're already playing. Been through a couple of those transactions. And I think it's a very good alternative. Not everybody needs to be the next Elon Musk on this planet, and 99.999% of the world population will never have the chance to be that. So it's also a question of being realistic with what you're currently building. But yeah, I think private equity is the best chance at selling your company in Switzerland at this time. Maybe Sophie sees it different.
No, I think you said a very crucial thing at the beginning, Laurent. It's really about what kind of company do you want to build, right? And at what scale and what speed and how big can you imagine this going or this taking, right? And I think there is a big difference in cultural and mentality. And yeah, of course, a private equity firm, they want to see something profitable. They want to see maybe a 5x on their deal in a few years, and then they're happy, right? And if that's the company you want to build, a company that maybe exits, I don't know, $250 million, $100 million, then this could be a really, really good partner, right? I have, for the first time in my career, now a private equity firm coming into a seed stage company.
Wow, that's early.
Yeah, that's very early. And that's the same. They see some profitability. They see a potential exit to another bigger private equity firm in 4 or 5 years. The goal is to make, and we talked to the founder, should we take that money? I was like, well, it depends the kind of company you want to build, right? And she is like, yeah, if I make this into $250 million company, this is a great outcome for me. And so the private equity partners are the right partners for us to take her to that next level. So yeah, I think it really depends. We should start at the very beginning, right? What kind of company is it? What do I want to build? And that defines who will be your partner for it. And I think there Switzerland could change something in the mindset or in the ambition or in, yeah, we need role models too, right? I think Nextthink is a great example of taking it, yes, private equity, but at a much larger scale. And I'm imagining this will inspire a few founders that are behind them saying, hey, they've done this, we could do this. And so that also helps you grow the ambition because you see examples who did it. Yeah.
And I think
for sure,
I think you can always start and aim for this moonshot of IPO or building a global business. And I think that's the right ambition to have, because if you don't have that, yeah, you're probably going to fall short quite soon. But along the way, 9 out of 10 are not going to make it anyway. So the second best option then is the private equity play. Can you then turn the company profitable? Can you make it a case that is actually good enough for someone to see value in it and at least get a decent outlook on it, or a decent payout on your company and the 10 years that you've invested into it? I don't think that this is in any way something bad or negative at all. I think it's a very good second best option, but it should be a second best option if we want to be ambitious.
In my climate space, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please, Sophie.
Even in climate tech, right? We see now more private equity. Like one example in Switzerland is Climeworks, right, where Partners Group actually led the last 2 rounds, which I thought the first was very interesting because it was before they had revenue, a business model, anything that was scalable. But then talking to the founders, I started realizing that they actually start with some revenue while selling other carbon credits to their customers. So not the ones that they're actually like taking out of the air as with direct air capture, but through other projects. And so they come into a realm of, I don't know, probably not profitability, but at least some healthy revenue. And that definitely has to do with having Partners Group on their cap table to really think, okay, how can we make this profitable early as we're still developing the technology that might still be 5-10 years out to really, really hit the market. So anyway, I thought that was interesting that they're even going into that sector.
That's a cool perspective. I also wanted to add one thing I have been thinking about a bit, and I think there are 2 different angles we can look at this IPO or liquidity topic. There's the founder perspective, and I feel from a founder perspective, if you have a 20, 50, 100, or $200 million exit, it's already decent. And if you're not completely diluted, you probably make much more money than you will ever need in your life. I mean, I don't know, a lifestyle where you could blow through all of that money in like a short time. So I feel the founder perspective, it will be life-changing pretty early on if you are not completely diluted and you have a decent exit, no matter if it's to private equity, a strategic buyer, whatsoever. And then there's the ecosystem perspective, right? So if you have that exit, a big exit into the billions makes a huge difference because that money can then flow back to a lot of employees. And all these people can reinvest parts of these funds into the next generation of entrepreneurs, into funding or even starting new businesses. This is super important from an ecosystem perspective. And there I feel the IPO is sort of a bit of a missing piece because at the moment I feel we in Switzerland are just sort of feeding the US machine to a certain degree. We have amazing technology, great companies, but then we sell them sort of too early. And then the IPO happens in the US. So the proceeds and sort of the market capitalization of that value happens abroad and not in Switzerland. And if we had more IPOs, which is a difficult thing as we discussed at the beginning, but if we had more IPOs, I don't really see it as an exit, although it is technically an exit. You actually have more liquidity through public markets that allow you to build a bigger company in the long run. So I feel that is sort of a missing gap that would be a very good thing for the ecosystem, that while it can be life-changing to sell your company for 20, 50, 100 million as a founder, for the ecosystem, I feel these IPOs and the lack of IPOs in Switzerland is a key part to really break through the ceiling that is holding us back to a certain degree.
Yeah, and in a way, we're asking a lot from a founder, right, who could probably have a similar return leaving after, in that earlier stage with still more equity than taking it another 10 years and getting fully diluted and working hard to get it all done. But yeah, you're right. It's mostly the ecosystem that needs that, maybe not the individual founder as much.
Yeah, I mean, Sophie, that's a good point. I know a few cases where the founders that were leaving the company early actually made more money than the founders that stayed on for the whole journey, even though the company was extremely successful at the end. But through the dilution and the opportunity cost of not doing anything else, there's a lot that can happen. So yeah, from a founder's perspective, I think selling, and that's one of the things that Amir Swissa, the Dine Deal founder, he kept telling me whenever I met him. He always said, if you have a chance to sell your company, sell it. He will always told that to me. And I think that's very contrarian, right, to what the VC would probably say. They would say, no, only if you reach a certain size and a certain amount. But he would always tell me that. And in my experience, I mean, I've not been on the entrepreneurial journey more than 15 years now, so I might change my opinion. But in my opinion, he's been right a lot of the times, because the chances that if you can sell the company today, you can sell it for much more in 2 or 3 or 4 years, which is very, very slim. So you need to be that kind of personality that really wants to go after this amazing big vision, and you simply don't care whether you're going to make 1 or 10 or 15 millions now, if you can make hundreds of millions later on. And I think the other part that we haven't touched here that is very important is secondaries. So a founder on this journey needs to be able to get this couple of millions off the table on this journey, so that they can feel comfortable going after this super, super big target. And I think in the US, that's, Sophie, you probably know better, but I think that's just very standard. It's normal. Whereas here in Switzerland, whenever you bring this topic up in a financing round, it's always a big issue. Not always, but it's often a big issue at first. And I think it changed a bit now. I haven't done a founding round in 2-3 years now, but that's always been an issue. And I think that's one of the things that is holding us back. If you don't give those liquidity events early on, founders will always be, looking at the earlier exit because it's life-changing for them. But if you change their lives on the way anyway, why not go for the home run from the start?
Yeah. No, here it's pretty standard that at Series B, you get a very generous payout as founders.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. So you can actually stay invested in the long run to build an even bigger company, not just take the first best offer that you get. I think in Switzerland, I think only Yokoi I know of, they did that pretty well. I think they had multiple secondaries along the way. And I think that was really smart for them to actually go all in and stay invested. But in general, we suck at that in Switzerland. Most investors say, no, you're crazy. We cannot do that. You will not be motivated anymore. I feel we have a lot of education to do, but more on the investor side, and maybe supporting the founders a bit more to be more pushy, to actually ask for that and really push it through, because this is also, again, from an ecosystem perspective, very important to do.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
So leaving the IPO topic or the liquidity topic, I also want to talk about what still gets funded. Last year was still a bit shaky in that sense. We saw overall less rounds and actually more concentration. So the funding, it's not gone per se, but I think it got more selective. Now also early news this year in January now is we see strategic capital in medtech. We see crowdfunding in the consumer and impact space, and some late-stage companies leaving Switzerland to scale elsewhere. Same problem again from an ecosystem perspective. Sophie, the first question for you is, I think it was now early January where Distal Motion actually announced that they are bringing on Johnson & Johnson on board. I think Distal Motion is a fantastic company. Michael, the founder, or I think he was not the founder, but the CEO, he's an amazing guy who's always also coming to events and supporting really the ecosystem in a big way. But what does that tell you if this sort of business model and the medtech sector is this still sort of the hot thing in the Swiss ecosystem where the investment money flows, and in other areas it's getting a bit more restrictive, so to speak?
I mean, bringing in a strategic investor like Johnson & Johnson doesn't necessarily mean that you're on a rocket ship per se, right? It also means that there is, potential interest for an acquisition or something strategic. And I'm always careful with corporate VCs, right? They don't necessarily have the same ambition. Like, they're not interested in an IPO case. They're not interested in a gigantic company. They're eventually interested in buying this for hopefully not too much, right? So when they come in. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a super, super strong signal. It's a strong signal in terms of that they have a technology that is relevant to the big players, right? But their interest is different than a classical VC that just wants growth, right? This is also, hopefully we can integrate this as soon as possible, as soon as it's fully validated. So yeah, I would see this with
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I like that perspective. I didn't think about it. When you read the news, you always think, oh, big successful news. Everything sounds always amazing when you read the headlines. And then you realize, wait a second, by thinking and reflecting on it, it might actually not be the best thing. Could be very good for the company, don't get me wrong, but it could be, again, from an ecosystem perspective, maybe not the best outcome that we could have hoped for.
Yeah, it depends what you value, right? If you think bigger is better, then maybe no. But if you think like, oh, I want this technology to succeed and reach as many people as possible, then Johnson & Johnson might be a really, really good partner for that, right? So it always depends.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
Laurent, early now in January, we also saw some crowdfunding happening. Already in 2025, I think there was quite some crowdfunding movement. Now we had a few more that did some crowdfunding. I think it was like Flappy with their cat flap doors powered by AI and other things.
I know them well, yeah.
How do you see that? Is crowdfunding in 2026 still a valuable source of funding, or is it more as a last resort if all other options basically failed and didn't work out?
I think it's both, depending on where you are in the stage of your company. So I love crowdfunding early on because I think it really helps you validate your idea, and it helps you build a relationship to potential customers early on. It helps you build traction. So crowdfunding early on, I think, is an amazing thing to do. Always has been. I'm extremely negative. I cannot say it differently. I'm extremely negative on later stage crowdfunding rounds because in my experience, and I've been an investor, not as a crowdfunder, but as an investor in a couple of those cases in the past, where it's just the last resort of trying to survive. And without the founders actually doing this on purpose, basically what you're doing is you're taking retail investors that don't know what they're investing into and basically telling them, this is a sinking ship, give us some money so we can maybe, close the holes. And then, oh shit, it didn't work out. Company's bankrupt. All of them lose their money. And I don't think we're doing ourselves a big favor in terms of an ecosystem by scaring off the retail investors like that. So early on, I think it's amazing. Best thing to do if you can. But later stage, I think it's just trying to keep your ship from sinking. And I think every founder, if they have to, will go there and will try. But I don't think it's the right way of doing it. And I've been an investor in a couple of companies, and I said yes to it a couple of times. So I do understand that this is a bit of bigotry, but that's my standpoint on it.
Yeah, fully agree. I think the last resort topic here could cause real damage for many people involved. Sophie, there's another rumor that circulated publicly now in January. It's a Swiss startup, or a startup that started out in Switzerland. Get Your Guide. They moved to Berlin with their headquarters. They still have a Swiss office, luckily, but basically the main part of the business is in Berlin now. So we sort of did lose a scale up there. And now there are rumors that they are actually looking at the US IPO. So it's not only outside of Switzerland, it's also meaning the IPO will probably happen outside of Europe overall. What does this say about Switzerland's role in the startup lifecycle? Also linking a bit back to the first topic that we looked at.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately a sad but also understandable path, right? It's like, okay, Switzerland is great to start, right? There is a small market where you can test things. There's a lot of talent. There's also for deep tech company a lot of like non-dilutive funding to get things started, right? So it's a really good place to start, but unfortunately not to scale. And I think that's where we should change, because as a society, Switzerland is losing on all levels, right? Because we put in a lot of funding for R&D and development and get things started. Think about just the universities. I think we're talking about 23 billion a year is invested into R&D and development. That's a lot of money, right? And it's also fantastic what comes out of it. But then when it's about scaling, we're not actually the ones benefiting from it, right? Or it's coming back into the ecosystem. It's foreign investors, or it's foreign companies that do the acquisitions, or it's even foreign stock markets. So yeah, I think what Switzerland should and could do is really figure out how to create an environment that lets companies stay in Switzerland as they scale, right? And I think two things need to happen. One thing, the Swiss AG as a structure, that's like a very basic thing, should be should be similar to like a Delaware C Corp, where it's super easy to take on investors, raise a round. It should be like a no-brainer. So anybody could just invest in this entity and you don't have to move and create another entity. So that's one thing. And the other is like the access to capital has just to be much quicker, faster. There has to be more available. So you don't have to move, that you could just grow in the country. And you can still open other offices. You can still open your Berlin office and your Paris and New York, but keep the headquarters in Switzerland. I mean, that would be ideal, right?
Yeah, totally. It feels a bit like we're planting the seeds, but we're not going to reap the fruits. After all the years of hard work, we sort of hand over the fruits to someone else to eat. In that case, the US IPO market to a certain degree.
Yeah, and to some extent, we're paying for it several times, right? We're paying
Exactly.
then again to buy the services from the things that we grew. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
Laurent, anything you want to add to this topic?
Yeah, I think it's a well-known topic and it's super difficult to change that.
No.
I mean, On did the same thing. Spotify did the same thing from Sweden as well. They're all going to America because that's where the money is, that's where the attention is, that's where the biggest, unified market is that you can find. I don't think that it will be possible in the next 10 to 15 years to structurally change that. I think we can just reduce the deficit, but I think it would be an overestimation or an overstatement thinking that we can turn this around. Or, I mean, that's not what you guys said anyway, but I don't think this is possible for us to turn it around. I think we can just make up some ground. That has to be the ambition on it. I don't see how we're going to turn the tables. And the most important thing for me, as coming from a founder's perspective, is and remains, as long as we can get the capital access for the good founders, it's a secondary problem to me where the money is coming from, as long as it's there. And I think we are making progress on that in the last couple of years. I don't know how many companies, when I started my career 15 years ago, would have been able to raise funding from American VCs or private equities or whatever. And that has shifted quite a bit in the last couple of years. So I think the tendency that we can get more funding for the really good cases, that is there. The trend is going in the right direction. And I just agree we need to accelerate this, and we need to be able to make bigger plays and bigger companies. I just want to stay realistic, and I don't think we will be able to have the big IPOs in Switzerland anytime soon. There would have to be a massive shift somehow in the markets for this to be happening. Yeah.
But maybe what you're saying is the right thing. Like this is a shift that needs, more than what we can do. But what we could already in the next 5 years improve is the capital that flows into Switzerland from abroad and also from inside Switzerland lets the companies to at least get to growth stage, right? And that is already a problem, right? Companies leave way too early or sell too early, right?
Absolutely.
And so if we can keep them longer,
agree.
if we keep them longer, they will have more talent. They will build larger companies. Maybe the IPO still happens in the US. It will still be good for the ecosystem,
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And one thing that I wanted to say before but forgot, thought experiment. Get Your Guide was founded in 2009. They're going to do an IPO, rumors, this year, next year. So let's say close to 20 years into their journey. If they were founded in 2009 in the United States, when would they have gone and done the IPO? I mean, it's hypothetical, but my belief in this is they would have been IPO'd 5 years ago, probably, because it's just you're growing much faster. You have much more access to capital. You'll be there much quicker. And I think that's the thing, Sophie, and I'm saying the same thing as you now. That's the thing we need to be. We need to be able to accelerate the pace from early stage to later stage startups here, not over there. If we can do that, that's already a big gain for the next couple of years.
No.
And I remember there was some Swiss VC report. It was the one from 2025 or 2024, where there's the biggest 20 rounds in Switzerland. There were no Swiss investors involved.
Exactly.
Remember that?
Yes,
and I was
exactly.
like, oh my God, like how bad is that, right? And how much of a missed opportunity also. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That report will actually come out on February 3rd again for last year, for 2025. So the next time we meet here in February, we'll have fresh numbers to discuss, which I'm really looking forward to. But I understand. I think you made a very good point. I think the order is clear. So first, access to growth funds, no matter where they're coming from, even if you have to relocate, that's okay. Second order is ideally you can stay in Switzerland and get access to growth funds no matter where they come from. That's what we are working on right now and where we see improvements happening. And then the third level, if we ever get there, is also getting growth funding from Switzerland. And the ultimate killer level will be to get an IPO in Switzerland. That's sort of where we are. So we're working on level 2 out of the 4 levels that we could potentially climb to. I like that.
Sounds like a plan.
Exactly. We have one more topic before I'm going to ask you about some prediction. It's about Switzerland, Europe versus the US. So it's a perfect segue into what we just started to discuss. Before we go there, I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor who is helping us to realize this format. Startup Days, I already mentioned in the beginning, happening on May 21st in Bern. Swisspreneur is going to be there. I'm sure Holyco is going to be there as well, again, to play some basketball or ping pong. So make sure to get your ticket at startupdays.ch if you haven't done so. And looking forward to connecting to many of you in person there. So, third topic, Switzerland and Europe versus the US. Earlier this month, the CES in Las Vegas took place again. And as always, there were many Swiss startups showcasing their technology at the Swiss Pavilion. And on the other hand, we also hear, or at least see LinkedIn's posts from founders who are just fed up with the European bureaucracy. Not so much Swiss founders, but especially European founders that say the markets are too fragmented, the bureaucracy is killing me, I'm moving to the US, I'm going to bring all my capital, all my know-how and my company there, and I want to go big or fail and come back to Europe if I don't make it. So, Sophie, from your perspective, Europe is producing obviously world-class startups, but we can structurally not scale them. We briefly touched upon that. Is the US simply better at rewarding this risk and ambition than we are in Europe?
Yeah, I think it comes to that very beginning of our conversation about this risk profile and ambition. I think there's something, I've been here now for 15 years, right? And you realize it's really deep inside of people, right? It's like the idea that you can somehow change the world, or the idea that you can be the next NVIDIA, or the idea that you can really build a global brand. It's something that people believe is true for themselves. They believe they can find the companies that do that. So investors think that way, founders think that way, clients think that way, regulators think that way, right? So it's through the entire chain. I think people have a different risk profile, and I think that makes a big difference. That in addition to all the other stuff we said, bigger market, more access to capital. But I think at the core is really the risk profile and the imagination, how big this could become. And I see this I work with Swiss founders for the last 15 years coming to the US and pitch, right? And most founders still pitch a product that's amazing, right? A US founder always pitches you a vision that is amazing. And I think there's a really core difference. And that then shows in all these elements. Even, like I said, even regulators think slightly different. Yeah.
And these are really cultural points that are probably hard to change. Also, as Laurent said, it will be almost impossible, or will take so much time to change. And Laurent, I wonder, with the clients that you work with, what are the main reasons that you hear from them why they leave Switzerland or Europe in general to move to the US and start and build their companies there?
I think for most of them, it's the two most easy points, which is access to capital and access to one more or less unified market that is much bigger. And the third one is also in a lower capacity access to talent. You know, if you go to the Valley, there's a lot of density around a lot of topics. I mean, we have amazing universities with ETH and EPFL, but the density of the business people in the Valley and the tech people there, it's just that's hard to beat or hard to come by. And I think it's also a bit of this. And I'm critical on that because I haven't done it myself, but I think it's also a bit this: the grass is always greener on the other side. If you're fed up here and it's not working for you, go to America and try it there. It must be better. And surely in some cases it will be better, but a lot of them actually come back after a couple of years, either because they didn't make it or because they were fed up with something else. But I always have this quote from Michael Jackson, the venture capitalist, in my mind. He once, I'm not quoting it word by word, but he once said, you go to the US for business and you go to Europe to retire or for vacations, right? And I always have that in my mind. I think that is a bit of what people think about in the startup landscape.
And I wonder sometimes, does it need to be one or the other, right? I don't think it has, right? I think you could play this really, really smart and keep your development in Europe. You keep some cheaper talent in Europe, but then move like the fundraising, the go-to-market, all of that to the US. So I think bringing a little bit of the Silicon Valley mindset to Europe, but still keeping the core and the quality and the development in Europe, I think that could be the key for lots of companies. And that's also in the direction I'm advising most of our founders. Don't give it up and like move, because that usually doesn't work, because you're good because you started where you are and you have the talent there, you understand these markets really well, but then use the US for expansion. Yeah,
that's a good point. And I think the cases I've seen lately that are quite successful at this, usually they're founder teams of a couple of people, and then one of them moves over to the States and the rest stays. So they have sort of, I haven't seen a lot of cases where without one of the founders going there, it actually performs well afterwards. Usually there's this one or two key employees that have to go there, have to roll up the sleeves again and start over, while this expansion that is costly and not free of risk is being financed by the good performance of the rest of the team and the founders in your core markets, Europe or wherever you are. So I think, Sophie, I fully agree. That's actually the model that I see working quite well with some of the customers that we work with.
And also the point you made, Laurent, about founder having to move, like in my also Swiss Next time, all the ones, Scandit, Beekeeper, some of these successes, like those founders were here more than in Switzerland, right? They literally like built their own network here. They started breathing the culture. They started like becoming one of the people here for at least for a decent amount of time to really understand. And I think that's crucial. Like everybody thinks like, oh, I can kind of delegate my US market entry and hire someone for my sales. That I've never seen that working. So that's maybe another big point. Yeah.
We had a really interesting podcast episode a few weeks ago with Steph from Cradle. Many of them were like ex-Googlers. They all worked in the US and sort of built a network there, but they're all Europeans, or most of them. So basically they live across Europe, and they said, don't waste your time with European VCs. They went straight to the US to get the necessary funding done. And they are building quite it's of course still a high risk, high reward game, but they built a very successful company so far in sort of the protein AI engineering by saying we go first with US investors because we have huge ambitions, but we are actually building sort of out of Europe with a European founding team. And I felt that combination was very interesting, and he was extremely vocal about it. He loves Europe. He is European. He supports Europe in everything he does. But he very bluntly pointed out where Europe is falling short and why they chose the US over Europe in that sense. And I felt that was a really interesting take on how to actually build with a global ambition, global scale, backed by US investors.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I mean, we also tried the US expansion, but we didn't go there as founders. So I have the scars to show that this is not working. So and that approach is also very interesting to say, let's get the network and the finances from the best market early on to open the doors, to get in the right places. And I mean, if they've already built a network in the past, fantastic, even better. So yeah, great way of doing it.
And there's one last area or topic I want to talk to both of you about, and it's about 2026 predictions. I'm personally not a huge fan, but I like to do that because if you can continue this format, I want to go back to them and say, okay, let's see, where were we right, where were we wrong, to then reflect on them and think, okay, what did we learn this year? So Sophie, what are your predictions for the Swiss startup ecosystem for 2026?
So I must say that visit, this like high level delegation that came in December with InnoSwiss, State Secretary, all the universities, also what I see, there's like Deep Tech Switzerland. I think there is some movement. I think we might reach a point, and maybe I'm too optimistic, but at the end of this meeting, we're like, you know what? In Switzerland, we have a thing that we could call, they called it a sandbox, where you could just pilot something. And I was like, wow, imagine we could pilot like the perfect startup environment in Switzerland, right? And that would include an AG that's really, really tailored to startups and not to KMUs, what's currently, right? So it really is ready for scale, like get visas digital, get like funding rounds digital, all of that. And then also figure out a government scheme to really incentivize more capital coming into Switzerland. The pension funds, growth capital, like really figure out a way that the government could fuel and back instruments that really help flow more money into venture capital and growth. And lots of other countries have done that. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do this, right? Israel did it, Sweden did it, the US, everyone did it. And there's lots of examples. And I don't know, there was a high-profile delegation here in San Francisco talking to VCs here. I don't know how quickly these things can move, but maybe there could be like a pilot and like, hey, how could the perfect startup environment in Switzerland look like? And yeah, I think that would be maybe not just my prediction, but maybe also my dream, right? To see how this could happen. Yeah.
Laurent, what are your predictions for this year?
I'll come from a more slightly negative and try to make it a positive. So, you know, everyone's been talking, not everyone, but lots of people have been talking the last 1 or 2 years about how AI is going to cut jobs and make everybody not necessary anymore. And especially last year, we had so many big time CEOs coming to their shareholder meetings saying we're cutting people because of AI, blah, blah, blah. I think there will be a bit of a turnaround this year. A lot of them will semi-publicly come back out and say, probably was a mistake. We should not have cut all these people. It's hurting our productivity. And I think we will see that even though AI is extremely powerful and I'm all in for AI, I believe we will create more jobs still than we're actually taking out of the economy. I don't buy into all this fear and craziness that we're all going to be without a job, only blue collar jobs will be there. I don't believe that. I work with AI every day. From what I see, it's growing exponentially. It's fantastic. I hope you're not going to come back in a year and tell me, haha, you were completely wrong. I really hope you're coming and saying that prediction was right. But yeah, I think that's my hope for this year, that we figure out how AI can make all of us more productive and not make more of us unnecessary in the workplace.
Yep. And I actually would like to follow up on what you just said. I think this year, I might be completely off and completely wrong, but that's what predictions are here for, that you can tell me, oh, you're so wrong 1 year from now. But I do think that due to that realization that AI is actually a leverage and really more people, and through that will actually increase the productivity, that we see actually quite significant GDP growth. And through that also have more activity in the whole M&A activity. So I think there will be more exits where Swiss startups will get bought probably by Americans or by global companies, because the technology that we develop here will even become more attractive and more valuable for these buyers, who can then really leverage big time into public markets or whatsoever. So I think we'll see significant GDP growth and we'll see more exits of Swiss startups, not only because we have had some of the crazy scale-ups like Scandit that you mentioned before in the making for many, many years, but also because of rapidly evolving AI and robotic startups coming out of ETH, for example, that are just going to change the game from a tech standpoint. So I think it will be a very hot year, and curious to see what we will be talking about 1 year from now. But I think more exits and strong GDP growth.
That would be fantastic, Silvan. If we get if I could put your stuff on my wish list, it would be the top 2 items on my wish list.
Let's see. As I said, I might be completely wrong and blame myself 1 year from now, but that's the prediction combined with a bit of hope, I would say.
But I heard this. I don't know where it was, but there was this theory that before the Industrial Revolution, we had like on average 2% GDP growth or something like that. My numbers might be off. And since then, now we've had like 4 or 5% GDP growth. And that's exactly what you're saying, that AI can be the lever now to on average get us to 7 or 8 or 9% GDP growth. So yeah, I don't think there's people out there that believe the same thing as you do. So I hope you're not wrong and that this is the future. And hopefully 26 is the kickstart.
The only thing that really worries me is like the European countries in that sense, because I look at the GDP growth in the US and I think you already hit like 4% something in Q3 last year, if I'm not wrong. And now even some of the Federal Reserve banks sort of increased their prediction to some even above 6%, which I think is crazy at that scale. And at the same time, you look at Germany or France or England, where we don't see that result. And I feel that is really dangerous because then it's only going to increase the gap that we already see. So that will open a whole lot new challenges. And it will be interesting to see how Switzerland positions itself in there and what we do, because we're sort of part of Europe, not of the European Union, but of Europe. And nevertheless, we do a lot of business with the US. So it will be an interesting year. Let's put it that way.
We've always been capable as a country to find very high quality, high value sort of industries to grow in. And I'm really confident in the Swiss capabilities of doing and pulling this off again, also in this AI craziness. But yeah, I think you're right. It's gonna widen the gap between the really successful and the unsuccessful companies, depending on how well you are in adopting AI and certain other technologies that are coming up. But yeah, I'm positive for Switzerland. Not so positive for Europe as a whole. Yeah,
I second that. You just triggered one thought. My co-founder at my new SaaS company, he shared something with me. It's a bit of a contrarian belief, but I really like the thinking behind it. He said, look now with the tariffs that Switzerland has, with like at the beginning, the very high 38, 39% tariffs, the industry will arrange itself. They will sort of make it work. And as soon as those tariffs, they will survive those tariffs because we can adapt and we learn how to adapt to not go bankrupt. And as soon as those tariffs disappear or get lowered, we actually have more margin because the stuff that we can do with our industry, some of the things are just unique. No one else in the world can do it. And in that sense, I really second what you just said. I'm very bullish on Switzerland because I feel this is just increasing the money-making power of Swiss companies to a certain degree by surviving the tough environments, but then when things get a bit easier, to benefit from going through those tough times.
I think if there's an economist listening to us now for the last 5 minutes making our predictions, he's probably shouting into his microphone, "You guys are so wrong. What are you saying?"
Exactly.
So I think we should do a fact check afterwards with an economist to see whether what we said just holds up. But yeah, let's see. We'll see at the end of the year.
Exactly. Cool stuff. Anything you want to add before we wrap up for today? All good. Everything said and done. Well, thank you very much for bearing with us for this very first Swisspreneur briefing. I really like this format to basically have the opportunity to talk about more current topics and maybe also making some bold or wild predictions, which might be completely off, but it was certainly a lot of fun for me. So there are two things I want to mention at the end. One is we have some events coming up at Swisspreneur. We show it to you here. Check out the website. The biggest event coming up is end of February, the Swisspreneur Slopes event, where we go skiing for a full day. So if you are around, join us there. And the second thing that I actually want to mention also is our next live session with the three of us will actually take place on February 12th, again at 5 p.m. CET, and we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about. I already mentioned it. The latest numbers of the Swiss Venture Capital Report will be released on February 3rd. So we have numbers to analyze, and I'm sure there will be some additional news of funding rounds, hopefully not bankruptcies, but maybe also, and exits, whatever happens in the next few weeks. We're going to address it together on February 12th. Sophie, Laurent, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really enjoyed the conversation, the discussion with you. And see you on February 12th again.
Great seeing you. Thank you.